Hey guys, what's up? This is Patrick, and in this video we're going to talk about why you should be overbetting the flop, and I'm going to give you 3 reasons, and then we're going to play some hands to put this all into practice. So first of all, I looked at the Russian Cash 200 pool, and we've got a lot of data in that pool, and we can see that there's a direct overfold. The overfold is small, and it's not the most compelling argument because the overfold is small, and so even with a lot of data, still a little bit of statistical insecurity, but seem to be consistent enough, and even a small overfold will lead to pretty big differences. So what you can see here is on the right side is the equilibrium strategy on Queen 9-5 button versus big blind, where in equilibrium we would already be overbetting. And then on the left side we can see an exploitative strategy if we increase the amount of folds slightly. So here we have the actual sims, and we can see slight overfold, right? 66, just increased it a bit. This is equilibrium, and then 62. So just a slight overfold, but you can see the difference in betting frequency, and then in particular in the bottom of your range, right? The overall frequency just goes up, but if you go back here, you can see bottom of the range, like top of the range is betting a lot anyway. If I just toggle between these two, you can see bottom, middle of the range just shoots up because, well, if we just get a direct overfold, it is going to be a good thing. Especially if that overfold is when betting large. So what I mean by that is, like, if we go here, we can see that the fold frequency increases from 62 to 66. That might not seem very significant, but what also happens is that the defending frequency goes down from 38 to 34. So more than 10% difference in the folding frequency, so in the defending frequency, and that will have a pretty big impact. So in other words, an overfold is always more significant when you bet larger because they already have a very narrow defending range, and if you make that more narrow by overfolding, then that is going to be more costly than when your defending range is very wide and then you overfold a few percent points. So in other words, like, this 4% point difference is quite significant. If you do the same thing, 4% point difference on a quarter pot bet where they are allowed to defend a lot more, then it's not as significant to your EV. All right, so that's reason number 1. Let's go to reason number 2. And this is like the main one that I want to hone into. Got some data here on the side where we can see how the Russian Cash 200 pool plays versus check back. And we can see that they are wildly imbalanced. Versus c-bets, they're sort of okay. Versus a check back, they're not at all okay. Especially versus small c-bets, they're okay, by the way. Like, they're slightly on the check raising, that's definitely a thing. And so there's exploits in that side of the game tree for sure as well. But here you can see probing too often, not very significantly, but still will have an impact on your strategy. More importantly, check bet fold 49 where it should be 34. We combined all sizes here. It's especially they're overfolding whenever they probe to turn small. So if they go quarter pot, you should pretty much raise any two. At least that's what you do in theory. Obviously, if you're playing the pool daily and you're playing versus the same racks, you need to be more careful so that you don't stand out too much. But be aggressive versus those smaller bets. And then the check fold 58 where it should be 46. Again, very significant overfold. If you plug in any of these numbers, like the check raise, meaning check raise versus delayed c-bet, and being this low, you'd see the solver go to range bet territory relatively quickly if you, without going for the overfold. So you just node lock the check raise already, like you're allowed to range bet because you're over realizing. If you look at the check fold, you can see it is pretty significant. If you plug that in, it's definitely going to range bet. Now, I'm not saying you should be range betting. I'm saying you should increase your betting frequency significantly to take advantage of the fact that your opponent is going to be not raising you enough and overfolding. All right, so this one is the coolest one, I think. At least this is the most exciting one to me, because a bunch of these are data driven. You can just say, okay, without looking to a sim, I can look at the data and say, okay, they're overfolding, so it makes sense to just be betting a bit more often. And same thing here on the turn, they're overfolding, under raising, so I should be more aggressively versus checks and versus smaller bets. But we don't really go into very specific strategies there. It's just very general. I think it works very well. It's a very potent strategy, but it's, to me, less exciting than stuff like this. So what we can see is after overbetting the flop, you make villain's game tree much more complex. One of the reasons is you check back more often, forcing your opponent to play this node where he feels really uncomfortable, where he needs to construct a betting range, a check calling range, check raising range, check folding range, and that all versus different sizes. So that's one of the reasons, but also after overbetting, the rest of the game tree is much more complex than after a small bet. So let me show you what I mean by that. Here we have an ace king 7, and the imposition player in equilibrium would be overbetting here, leveraging the fact that we have an advantage at the top of the range. Big blind calls, now the turn is a queen. And let's see what needs to happen here in equilibrium. Your opponent should be leading range, which I can already guarantee you they would be checking range. The vast majority of Russian cash players. They need to be leading range because of this. You can see throughout the entire range a very significant advantage for the out of position player. And that is because of the fact that hands out of position here has 21.3% flushes, in position just 3.5. So what ends up happening to the strategy, there is leading, but there's also overbet leading. You can see 27.5 chips here, 150% of the pot. Let me do it like this. This is something that should happen in equilibrium that you now know, but your opponents are not going to know. Just for fun, what you could also do is say, okay, well, what if I just wanted to jam here? Can I jam in equilibrium? And you can see there's a little bit of jamming. This is definitely costing you EV. Don't do this. This is more of a gimmick. When I found out, this happened to me once and I jammed because, well, I was like, this is a thing. To some extent, I'm just going to jam here and just see what happens. Most profitable sizing would be 150% here as a lead, and you're bleeding 40% of the times. And then making ace king, ace queen indifferent, but also some ace 10 with a spade, king jack with a spade, stuff like that. So that is one thing that should happen. Now, let's assume that instead of the turn being a queen of spades here, we go for the 5 of clubs. We face a check here because now there's no leading red, there's no advantage in the top of the range. If you look at the ranges, kind of polar. Hijack has the top of the range and bottom is for the out of position player. And no need to lead here. We face a check and we decide to check back here. And let's say now the river is queen of spades. And then what you will see is there's now some 5x jams here. You might be like, well, yeah, okay, there's like just a block bet. Well, what if we just add like 150% bet? There's still going to be some jamming. You should play a very big bet or check strategy here. And a lot of players are not going to understand that they need to be betting very big. Also, if you face a bet here, you should probably check jam always, which again will probably not happen by the pool. And if your opponent is not finding some really big bets here, the EV of a ton of these calls on the flop goes down quite dramatically because the solver realizes, okay, I can call like my whatever 6-4 of hearts here, but only if I maximally get the maximum EV that I should be getting in all of the future lines, right? If you're not leading on any of the spades, and just to show you, like if you would put a 7 on there, there's going to be some leading as well. A 7 is actually a spade, as a pairing card, sorry. On a 6 here, you're going to have some leads. As you can see, 115%. You could also just say, okay, let's simplify this and just go small. Maybe you can bet our entire range if we go small enough. But there's definitely going to be a lot of leading here. If you miss those, then the EV of calling 6-4 is probably going to be negative because you're not going to make as much money. If we go back to that queen example, by the way, the correct exploit would be here to just basically range check back. So you face a range check, your opponent checks quickly, and you're just going to assume he's checking his entire range rather than mixing. Then the exploit would be just check back your entire range and make it so that your opponent is not able to capitalize on the fact that he has all these flushes that you can't have. That's the reason why the solver wants to lead there. If we now go back, multiple reasons why you should be studying this, implementing it into your game, and trying to get the maximum out of these strategies as possible. What I'll do now is I'm going to open 2 tables of Russian cash, and we're going to try to emphasize specifically the flop play here in single red spots. We might not find too many spots because obviously this happens only when we're in position versus the big blind. But where we find some spots, we'll go bigger, and I will try to emphasize flop strategies in general. Right, here we go. 2 tables. Left side we called pre-flop and we got a check back here. We are going to check again. And on the right side we open queen jack, flop top pair, and we get a lead by a presumed recreational. We are just going to call. On the left, sorry. I'm thinking about check raising here or calling. I'm thinking about calling, and then I'm probably going to lead the river here because it feels like he has ace X. I don't know, it just feels like a kind of a non-play in equilibrium, but yeah. check raising turn feels kind of weird. Maybe I should just check raise turn because he just plays it so very face up. I don't know. On the right, we just go in. He could have a 7. He could have a straight. But realistically, we're going to have the best hand. He's going to call worst 2 pairs. He's sometimes going to call top pair. He's sometimes going to call any pair because he doesn't believe it. Not the greatest. I could prefer obviously to jam a 7-6 unblocking all the top pairs. But I think still we just have a very clear jam here. In case you're wondering why I was laughing, I texted Gary Chappelle, who's playing, that I am lazy owl here. When I moved to Andorra, I couldn't use my Dutch account because I'm not living in the Netherlands anymore. So I needed to play on this account, which I had prior to my Dutch account. And initially the Netherlands didn't have any license to operate, and it was more of a grey market. We check and call here. And the river is close, but I think we call mostly. This is going to be low frequency 4-bet, mostly folds. Although I'm not entirely sure about this rake structure because I don't really play it. I'm getting a 3-bet blind feed blind, pulls slightly on the 3-betting, so gotta be somewhat careful, but doesn't mean that we're going to call more often. A lot of players would read into that as, okay, they're under 3-betting, so we need to call more and 4-bet less. And in reality, you're 4-betting slightly less, but calling significantly less. Here we are just going to go and bet. Quite likely going to be betting flop, turn, and river. This is a call. That's a gin card. I'm kind of thinking like we need check. We are going to be betting king, jack. We're probably betting our entire range. Let me think. But aces, kings. I think I'm just going to check. Like, this is close. Betting probably isn't the worst. Not a great river, obviously. I'm just going to bet. Wait, let's see what kind of player type is this. Okay, so it seems like he's not very aggressive. If this is one of the more aggressive guys, then I think you can consider block betting very small, but I think people are not going to be raising me enough here. So I'm just going to bet 40-ish%, I think, and then take it from there. Like, the annoying thing there is that betting small is not going to raise enough. I think if we check, we're going to, like, it's really hard for him to find bluffs. He needs to find 1 pair hands as a bluff, and I don't think the pool is doing that. Maybe even some 2 pairs need to bluff, and I don't think the pool's doing that. So I think we just bet ourselves and hope that we get a call by some 2 pair. First 3-bet here, we mostly 4-bet, I think. We're a bit deeper, I think calling is fine though. On the left side, we faced the flop bet, we called turn bet, we min raised because we're not very deep, and now we just go ahead and put it in. Yeah, that's a bit lucky for us. On the right side here, when facing 3/4, we gotta be somewhat careful because the pool is slightly under bluffing. I think I know the name though, so I think he might be one of the more aggressive guys. I'm not entirely sure if I remember the name correctly. Generally speaking, like, Eastern European guys are generally better than most of the other racks. We get a check here, which is fine. He shouldn't be betting at a very high frequency. I think we just check pure. He shouldn't be checking at a very high frequency because we are going to call hands like ace king, ace queen, ace jack. Specifically ace jack of spades and clubs are going to be calling. So first that sizing. So we are going to have a reasonable amount of aces. It's not like he has a massive advantage. At the same time, whenever he bets large on the flop, fold here, we'll go and block bet here. At the same time, whenever we face a very large bet, we can assume that he's not betting his ace king, ace queen, ace jack himself always. So yeah. This is kind of thin. Wow, wow. I was like hoping to get it. Basically, I was thinking, okay, I think he's not going to check raise an ace often enough. And he's never going to be check raise bluffing there, I think. When I say never, I mean very rarely. So I get to just bet small here and put him into a world of pain. But yeah, luckily he ends up calling with king high, which okay, there's some clubs, I guess, that he still beats. Like I definitely value the heart, like just having the balls to just click call. Like, the only thing is you'll beat, yeah, there will be some bluffs that you block. We 3-bet here, this texture, we are going to go and half pot with range, I think. Here versus Gary facing a 4-bet, not too thrilled about it, but I think he'll probably find enough 4-bets versus me. We're not going to have leads here, I think. No, we're not going to have leads. I was kind of confused. Sometimes you have some leads in ace high textures, but definitely not in this formation. Why is that definitely not in this formation? Maybe we're going to call some ace-king pre-flop. Actually, not entirely sure. We get a 10% bet here. I'm just going to fold. Like, we should have some king highs that is still beat. It's very easy to overcall here. Let's put it at that. And the pool generally overcalls here out of position when you face a small bet. And even like facing a 10% bet, supposed to defend quite tight because, well, what kind of air does my opponent have? There's some king, jack, king 10 type hands. There's the only thing that I can really beat. There should be maybe some suited connectors in there at a very low frequency. I think people miss those a bit more often. So it's very easy for me to just be in a situation where it's very easy for me to be in a situation right there with that hand right here where I just beat 90 and I lose to 99% of his range or something like that. Overbet and check. We'll just go for it here. He's not sitting a full stack, which is a bit alarming. Getting a squeeze here by Paris. Paris is usually playing a pretty aggressive game, so I am going to call for bet, even though this is pretty wide. Well, we get a jam, to which we fold. Calling flop, calling turn here with the open ender. And I'm assuming there's a pretty decent edge to be had if you know how the pool's playing them and if you know what kind of mistakes they're likely making and if you're not making those mistakes yourself. Interesting spots on the left table. We could check, which would be reasonable. I'm actually going to check. We rolled pretty low. I don't think we get to range bet by any means. And if we check more, we are forcing our opponent to make more mistakes. Similarly to the stuff that we talked about before we started playing, where if we check back more, they're going to be making more mistakes versus check than versus bet, generally speaking. So they're going to not raise often enough here, for instance, which makes me want to just bet and deny equity. If he ends up, let's say, having something like pocket fours, 5, 6s, then we get a free fold. We don't get put into indifference as often. This is kind of weird. I generally don't think they are bluffing, but it is definitely such a weird line. Called quickly as well. I'm going to call here because I've not, maybe king queen, I don't know. Like, it feels weird to me. Yeah, okay. Kind of like probably you just don't call versus this guy, to be honest. But like, he's playing 300 hands, very nitty. Probably you just don't call there, but I didn't have the discipline. That's just the way it is. Generally speaking, when you face a guy like this, and you're like, that's kind of weird, creative from you, what the fuck are you doing? Then it's just the thing that you think is the case. A guy like this is going to severely underbluff. Having said that, do I blame myself for calling my hand? Like, I don't know, like probably not horrible, although I highly doubt that this guy's bluffing often enough. I think it will be losing, but yeah, annoying. We will go ahead and call here. Casually flop quads. Let's hope on an ace. Let's just manifest that ace on the turn so that we have a chance on winning the jackpot. Or 5 or 10 of diamonds would be cool as well. We're just going to call here. If he has aces, then we have a 2 outer to win a reasonable amount of money. If we jam, we can probably not folding aces. But yeah, we just got to call. We won't be winning the jackpot. I think we got a lead now though. Like, we could make the mistake of not leading there, but that seems horrible because he's checking all of his value back here. So I think we just got a jam. Not going to have too many bluffs there, right? It's tough to have bluffs, but we will have some ace jack, ace 10, ace queen. Yeah, but tough to have bluffs. And we might have some 4 and the 4-5. We actually, it's tough to have bluffs, I'll be honest. We're not going to have naked 6x. Yeah, 8-9 isn't really calling the turn, so it's really hard to even have one pair hands. We might have some pocket 3s or something like that. Pocket deuces we're going to have at some frequency. Those would be bluffs. Maybe even something like pocket 9s can just jam as a bluff, just because we struggle for bluffs so much. Pretty standard call versus 3-bet here. This guy plays very tight though. Had I known that, I might just want to fold back pre-flop. Like there's a reasonable amount of hands that he's played. He seems to be playing very, very nitty. A 4% 3-bet, 10% RFI or PFR. That's just way, way, way too little. So we just fold, I think, there. Just quickly considering whether I want to have any leads with my range. I don't think I do. And with my hands, definitely not. So it makes for a relatively easy decision. Here, do I want to change my hand into a bluff after facing a raise on the flop? It is tempting, although I would be targeting hands that I am blocking. So I'm just going to give up. I think I would be blocking ace, deuce of hearts, ace, jack, and then pocket deuces primarily to fold here. I'm not sure if he's going to fold pocket deuces. That seems rather ambitious for the flop raise. Here we would go for bet 50 and check, and we are going to check. We didn't have many instances where we even have the reasonable option to overbet or check, which is kind of sad. Here I could go ahead and block bet. I think it would be fairly reasonable. Actually, I'm going to do that. Like, let's just go on. With the good luck. Sad, you're going to make it to YouTube if you call here. You're just going to give him a swipe, but I'm not going to bluff here. I'm just going to check back. Ooh. So this is the type of stuff that I think we want to fold this deep. It is really tempting to call, but I am just going to be disciplined and fold. That's good to see. Here on the left, I wanted to bet small. I got preoccupied with the right hand and I checked, which is going to be a mistake. Now that he bets big, I'm never going to fold here. I think when he has a 38 VPIP and just chooses this sizing, I think it's just quite likely as a recreational. Not sitting in a full stack either. So a lot of things point towards this being a recreational, and if he's a recreational, then he's going to have a queen sometimes. He's going to have random stuff, completely random stuff sometimes. So if I call here and he shows me pocket fives, I wouldn't be surprised. If I call here and he shows me king jack offsuit, I wouldn't be surprised. And a reasonable amount of the times he's going to just have me beat, but I don't need to win 100% of the times, or even more than 50% of the times. I need to win roughly 40-ish% of the times here, and we're definitely going to do that. Yeah, so this time we lose, unfortunately. Even now, I still have 2%. Can't roll the 2-outer, 1-outer actually. You gotta be somewhat careful there with calling versus every Russian cash recreational, but given the combination of tells, him not sitting full stack, him choosing a 3/4 sizing on this board, and that was a third one, can't remember now. Choosing a large sizing, not sitting full stack, maybe those are just the two, I'm not sure. Actually, look at this now. He went 2.2 pre-flop, which might indicate that he's not a complete whale. It's close though. Like you're going to deal with limited information when you're making the decision. I think just going for it is fine. Here I'm just going to be barreling too often. I know that this is probably not going to be a bet because we're blocking some folds. With like king 10, even jack 10 will likely fold here of hearts, but still know that the pool's overfolding there. So I'm just going to go way too often with my air. Here on the right side, it's very easy in general on this note to check your air too often and bet your top pair plus too often. So I want to be wary of that because the pool is delayed c-betting too often. So I prefer to have a stronger calling range than a solver model would indicate there. Very tempting to put out the coffee bet, which we're going to do. I think we just get like many folds there. But I don't think we get check raised ever, which is kind of the purpose of the bet. Because if you don't get check raised ever, then you can get away with going very thin for value. If he's not bet check betting enough, the list goes on and on. If you're playing versus a more passive player, you want to over defend, and you can over defend right quite significantly. Whether I get to over defend my hand there, it's probably just fold if you're not sure, especially if you're making a video. Getting a relatively quick check back. Don't think we are going to have the best hand in the majority of the time here. We could potentially check again and bet the river or something like that, but just betting the turn is fine, I think. Getting a small bet here shouldn't really happen. He should go big bet or check. I could potentially raise sometimes, which would be okay, I guess. Calling is definitely more standard. In's a check back. I don't think this is going to be an 8 very often. I don't think this is going to be a jack ever. It's kind of tough. What do we want to do here? Like either check raise. Check raise is letting him bluff sometimes, but he's not going to bet often enough. It's kind of whatever. I'm just going to overbet myself. It's one of those spots where I would be bluffing. I would be bluffing no hand if given the opportunity, because I think he's just going to massively overfold. But I also think that he's not going to be betting often enough or raising often enough versus my smaller bets. Just like a very uncomfortable spot. Alright, so that's it for this video. If you guys have any questions, drop them in the comments down below. There's going to be a link to our Discord channel. Feel free to join that. I'm going to be hanging out there on a daily basis. If you're playing again today, good luck at the tables and talk to you guys soon. Bye.